agency building models from the storytelling side, we have agency building models from the interactive side. And really, these models are cognitive technology. I think they're like the original educational technology that we evolved to kind of understand the world around us. And they involve abstracting the world, finding the kind of underlying things. And I think both of these are really a response to being stuck in time. Okay, well, basically we are always stuck in this time stream. And yet, we want to be able to move experiences outside, out of these spaces of time. If I'm a caveman, and I go out of my cave and I'm almost eaten by a tiger, and I can go back and tell a story from my friend, the other caveman, and oh, there's this tiger outside, be careful to go out. I basically taken the experience that I had, transferred it through time and space to this other person. And so he's learned from it. He's learned from my experience. So we've displaced it. And, I think that this is a lot of why we evolve these technologies. So to kind of wrap that up a little bit, we have experiences that we have, either through play or through story, where we start building abstractions of the world and world models from that. Really, they're compressed versions of the world from abstractions. And we use that to predict the future and change our behavior. Obviously, Clark said the best way to prevent the future is to predict it. And in fact, a lot of the role of story has been kind of building these potential futures, these regions of possibility space, and trying to flesh them out and say, ooh, look how good this is, look at how bad that is. And they now become landmarks for kind of how we deal with the world when we want to push the system in different directions. So going a little bit more into the story structure, a lot of stories start out and we kind of get all these different characters introduced at the beginning. And at that point in time, the structure of what's going to happen is very fuzzy in your mind as a viewer. As you think further and further into the future, a much wider set of possibilities can kind of unfold as you watch it. So in Star Wars, at the beginning, you meet these characters, and you don't know what's going to happen, really, until you start watching the movie. From the initial thing, you might think that it's going to be about a turf war that Luke has with a fellow farmer, on Tatooine. Or it might be Leia assuming her, hidden dream to be an exotic dancer, or Darth Vader to be an industrial designer. But all these things are possibilities that exist, inherent characters, and then you get before the movie goes, okay? Now, once Star Wars starts, actually, we actually see these sequences unfolding, and every time something happens, it's actually kind of narrowing the range of your future possibilities. And this is generally kind of the way the causal link works in storytelling. A lot of times we're filling in the adjacent possibility space as we watch this. So like in the scene from Indiana Jones, when he's running out the temple and all these traps are going off, in your head, you're kind of filling in all the possibilities. Oh, what if you tripped there? Or what if you fall down that hole? Or what if the rocket would go from? So in fact, you're imagining all these little branches of possibilities that don't actually happen in the film. Well, that's what makes it interesting. Is the understanding that he took this very kind of precarious path through this possibility space. Other things like Star Wars, just, kind of the grit and the realism and the backstory and, the fact that the spaceships were dirty, in a softer way, it's filling in this possibility space and making this whole world seem very real to you as you watch it. But really, toward the end of that story, so what we want to do is start amplifying. Having very small events lead to very large outcomes. And this is what I call dramatic amplification. So at the end of Star Wars, basically it all comes down to these two major possibilities that are going to happen. Either, the rebels are going to be crushed when the Death Star fires on their base, or the Death Star is going to blow up. It all comes down to whether these two little photon torpedoes get on this little hole. So these very minor events are going to push the entire world state in kind of very, wide-ranging areas. Now, one of the fundamental things that I found is probably the biggest obstacle we face as interactive storytellers is the fact that in linear storytelling, the director knows the future. And by knowing the future, the director kind of understands which seemingly kind of minor details or events are important to the outcome and then presents those to you. And we don't know that in interactive storytelling. And in simulations, there's this kind of idea of chaotic systems, which is that you can take a system, like let's say we take a ball, put it upside down, and drop a ball on top of it. If we move that ball just a little bit to the one side, it might end up in a very different space. And this is kind of basically chaos, which is the very minor kind of initial conditions can lead to very wide-ranging kind of end conditions. And the same thing really is pressed to the extreme in storytelling, I think. So, where, it might just be that, because this glass of water fell over, our hero ducked in time and missed the assassin's bullet, and then went on to save the world from certain destruction. And so, only if you knew what was going to happen could you present that in the way that linear story presents it, which is kind of one of the things that we're really struggling with in interactive drama. And so, in linear drama, you can show the causal chain exactly as relevant to the outcome. Now, a lot of linear storytellers have started playing with this causal chain in interesting ways. A very typical thing that's very common in almost any film now is that you actually start developing a lot of different kind of subplots that over time, start merging together. And one of the things that kind of keeps your interest is you're kind of wanting to see, okay, how are these two backstories going to tie together? And this is something that really came from literature. It's not very much in books where you have these multi-threaded stories that slowly resolve into one main storyline. Certain movies kind of do this more densely than others, but this is a very common thing when people do with causal chains. There was kind of an extreme version of this, what we call time code, where in fact they ran all these in parallel. They had 4 separate sections of the screen that were all running the whole time. So in fact, rather than sequentially jumping back and forth between these, and sometimes they would merge, split apart, etc., but it was a parallel running of this kind of multi-threaded storytelling. One of my favorite types of stories is one where it's kind of going along, and then you kind of have a sense of where it's going, and then all of a sudden it just takes a total left turn on you. And The Matrix is probably a really extreme example of that, where you think it's a story about this hacker, and then he takes the red pill, and all of a sudden, holy shit, where's this going to be going? Now, there are kind of softer versions of this. When I saw Fight Club in the trailers, and I went to go see the movie, at some point I realized this is not the movie I was expecting to see. This is really much kind of film without materialism, which looked like it was going to be this action beat-up guys movie. And so you can kind of do this in different ways where you're defining the expectation, not only within the story chain, but also kind of with the entire movie experience that we package. Memento is one of the really interesting attempts to kind of come to the causal chain here, because as the events unfolded in Memento, at some point, each future point in the chain caused you to reevaluate what you'd seen before. And so you actually had to go back and rebuild the past linkages. And as the story went deeper and deeper, you were having to reconstruct very large regions of this causal chain in your head. And so in some sense, it was kind of like a puzzle game as you were reconstructing what really happened as you watched it. One of my all-time favorite movies is Groundhog Day. And Groundhog Day was really nice because it felt the most like a game to me, because basically we had this linear sequence that the guy was going through, but then, all of a sudden, it's 6 o'clock in the morning again. And you see him do it again. And then it happens again. And again. And so what was really interesting about Groundhog Day was that, basically, it was a game. When we started. Now, I talked about how important it is for the director to kind of know where the future is going, because it can show the development causal chain. Groundhog Day was a really interesting example of the director not only knew the future, but knew the past. He knew what you had already seen in the movie. And so every succeeding day, he was able to skip over more and more. And you kind of just filled in those blanks, saying, okay, well, the same stuff happened here, but this was the difference in that day. And so he was actually really able to, in your imagination, cover almost an eternity of experience that Bill already had